Hi folks, it's Derek McCann again. In this extract from a larger presentation, I'm giving you a walkthrough of the main features that I tend to point out when I'm making a sales presentation on the Genos reports. This doesn't go into things like consistency and familiarity, it just looks at the main features as the reports present. We are in a development environment. It means that our reports have no other objective than to help the people who go through them to understand what do I do next to make improvements in the way I turn up. So all of our reports, as I say, one, they have very high design values. The reports themselves are really quite beautiful. The design on them is really superb, but they're also deeply informative and highly action-oriented. I do not intend to go into all of the reports in detail, but I did want to, let me move this panel, I did want to give you a little flavor of some of the way in which we've designed these reports so that they are uniquely focused for development environments. So what you're looking at here is a small part of one report that looks at a scale called self-management, the extent to which you manage your own emotions. And the first thing I draw your attention to is the number one item. I mentioned earlier there are 6 scales. They have 7 items per scale. And you can see that in this situation I'm talking about manages their emotions effectively in difficult situations. When we present that to the people who work with you and work for you, the first thing we ask them when we say that is, hey, how important is it to you that Derek manages his emotions effectively or in difficult situations? So how important is it to you, Mr. Employee? How important is it to you as Derek's boss? How important is it to you as Derek's peer? How important is it to you, Derek? So, and that ranges all the way from not important through slightly important, all the way up to highly important. And this is an important, unique feature of the Genos offering. Right in doing this for every single item and every single respondent, we are setting an internal benchmark. We are asking the people internally, what do you expect from Derek? So logically, the next thing we're going to say is, and what are you getting from Derek? What's his level of demonstration of this particular behavior? So to what extent does Derek manage his emotions in difficult situations? Significantly less than others, all the way up to significantly more than others. So before we even move much into the report, you can see that on one hand, we're saying, what is it you as Derek's direct reports, peers, and boss expect of him, and what's he delivering? That, as I say, is delivered for every single item, because remember, our focus is development. And sometimes development may be just a matter of 2 or 3 items where a candidate needs to improve to start really knocking it out of the park, as the Americans would say. So let's look at how we present that back. Down below, you'll notice that for every single scale we produce or we reproduce in the report, every single item, the importance score under I, in this case it's 4.8. The demonstrated score under a capital D, which in this case is 3.8. A difference score or a delta score. And notice that there is a 3-part traffic signal system of sorts. Where a difference which is within an acceptable range gets a green light, a difference within an acceptable or within a not quite acceptable range, but moderately out of range gets that yellow light, and then the third one gets that kind of burnt orange light, the 2.0 you see down below. Here's something else which is really important. Besides the fact that they are seeing how they match up on every item against the expectations of every person in their organization who has responded on the assessment, they also get to, and there are those lights, they also get to compare themselves against an external management population. The box I've just highlighted, let me unhighlight it so that I can re-highlight it. You can see it there. That box appears on each of our scales. And that is an average of the scores that were received by the leader of management population who have passed through this assessment up to the last, up to and including the last 3 months. So they're the average scores of leaders that have completed this assessment. And we define a leader or a manager as anybody who has completed the assessment who has 4 or more direct reports. So this really is very much a benchmark for people managers, people leaders. The extent to which your score is below that box is the extent to which you compare unfavorably, if you like, with the external population, that you are not reaching the average scores of typical managers out in the workplace. If you're inside that box, your scores are consistent with the scores of typical scores of managers out in the workplace. And if you're above it, your scores are very much exceeding those of a typical manager outside. So on the one hand, the importance score gives an internal benchmark. This gives an ability to measure against an external benchmark. And this is important for a whole variety of reasons, but it's important particularly for the impact that millennials have had on the attitudes of pretty much every generation of workers, even baby boomers like myself. And that is increasingly workers and employees recognize that they really need to be a commodity or a brand unto themselves, that they probably won't go into jobs the way their parents did and stay there for a lifetime, and that there's a necessity that they ensure that they continue to raise their own personal skills, not just so they meet the internal requirements of the organization they currently work for, but so that they are consistent or even superior to the performance levels of people outside. So this gives a candidate a really unique look at how do they compare to managers in the outside world. And again, let me draw your attention to the detailed by item results down below. BM stands for benchmark. If you're inside that benchmark, well, then there's a double arrow from left to right. If you're below that benchmark, there's a down arrow. And I don't have an example in this one of one that is above the benchmark. What I would say to you is, just before I go from this page, just notice, one, how quickly you were able to master understanding this page. Secondly, how focused it is upon getting you right to the detail of those things that your internal audience expect more of you in, the behaviors, and those things where if you wanted to improve your external value, you should be focusing. Our reports are no doubt, hands down, superior to any other report in the EI marketplace, simply because they were designed for the purpose they used to drive development. The reports come in 2 different flavors. You saw the 2 different models. One was the original generic emotional intelligence model, and the other one was the leadership variant of the model. And we refer to the first version as the workplace model, and we have 3 different variations of the report. A 360, which is the candidate plus the person they work for, their boss, if you like, the direct reports, their peers, and any other sort of people that might feed back upon them. There's some wonderful flexibility in our online system that also allows clients to define the terms used for those audiences. So for example, in a legal firm, one might talk about senior partners, and assistants instead of peers, direct reports, and manager. The 180 report is a really tremendously useful tool where an individual wants to get a quick snapshot of how did they look through the eyes of a single audience. So it might be me and the people who work for me, or it might be just a very quick snapshot of how I look to a single set of clients, or a combination of different colleagues in the workplace where I'm planning development. And the final one is a self-report, which allows one going into a coaching engagement, for example, to do an assessment of how do I feel I show up. And again, the focus is upon giving some development tips at the end of that. I cannot remember in this presentation if I mentioned this, but each candidate's report is accompanied by a 20 or 30 page personalized development tips workbook that talks them through detailed actions that they can take to follow up on the report. So for coaches, consultants, or trainers who are delivering this to their clients and their candidates, it's a tremendously strong offering and resource. So that's the workplace version. The other version, as I mentioned earlier, is one that specifically targets leaders, We have the same variants, but if you put the two reports side by side, you'll find that the way that they approach things is very, very different. The leadership series is really aimed at people who either currently have responsibility for leading other people or aspire to have that responsibility. So I've already mentioned that the reports are high design values. They look beautiful, they're deep, and they're actionable. And it's not in the scope of this presentation to go into each report one by one. Just sufficient to say it is all about what can this person do next, what behavior can they change that is going to make them more effective doing whatever it is they're trying to do.